content that gets lagged, because whatever the class that we are not covering, that will be covered in the upcoming classes. So it's not just a tight timeline that we should complete, but if anything, there will be extra classes for sure, for resume building, for mock interviews. Uh, if anyone wants mock interviews, or we can like we have also an extra session for the interview discussion in terms of focusing on the CI/CD. So these days, most of the interviewers looking like initially before like few years, they simply ask the different stages in the pipeline. But in terms of like last 1 year, 1.5 year, so they're looking for in terms of security standards. How do you secure your sensitive informations in the CI/CD pipelines? How do you create a efficient, scalable pipeline for the developers? So those things we're gonna discuss in the like separate session. So that will be helpful for your interviews in terms of the way of like how you need to answer. All the discussions will happen. But our focus currently is to cover the important topics that I want to share you, and then followed by the practical projects that we're gonna do post the discussion. But so like one request from my side is just be patient in terms of understanding the concepts. Like a lot of information that I'm sharing will include the theory plus practical. So practical anyway, you guys will do on their own once the session is done or whenever you get time. But projects anyway you do obviously to get understanding of the overview UI and how the real world scenarios will look like when we are working with the developers or when we are working on a feature that you want to design. So that way you can get the hands-on. So during the projects. But so for the like for this week, this will be mostly theoretical plus practical examples on the specific use cases that I'm sharing. But yeah, until then, like I request you guys be on like just hold like wait for a couple of days just to cover like whatever the syllabus I have. So, so in the last few sessions, we discussed like the fundamentals of the DevOps, CI/CD, SDLC, and also we like there are special classes on Copilot. I'm not sure how many of you gone through, because those classes, if you see like the more number of times you see, the more like it will be like the features that he explained to be registered on your brain, and it will be easy for you to explain those during interviews in case if the interviewer looking for the uh, in case like for sure there will be an AI question that you get in the interviews. So if you like to like end to end, if you want to answer that, so those sessions will be helpful, and those sessions you will get only if you see couple of times, not just once time. If you see and then go, like that doesn't work. You have to see and you have to practice on your own the way how we showed. So now we are actually going into GitHub Actions. So this session, today's session will be like there are a couple of things that I need to cover. First, like we're gonna talk about the introduction, and then we have like some key concepts. So these concepts, like we like if you go inside a project, if the project is running on GitHub Actions, so every time you like hear words like jobs, steps, workflows. So these terminologies. So those are the key concepts that we're gonna discuss in this session. And the third one is like we're gonna do a small demo of how the actual workflow running on the UI and what happening in the background and the different parameters. Just a low level. So anyway, down the line we're gonna do complex workflows, but for today's sessions we're gonna create a simple workflow, and then we try to compare the GitHub Actions with other CI/CD. So the reason being is right. So there are some projects, MNCs. MNCs anyway, you're gonna not like you are not gonna propose the CI tools, because most of the times the tech leads or the architects are gonna propose. But if you're working in a mid startups or product-based companies, so you are the one should be like proposing the right CI/CD tool based on their environment. So in order to propose the CI/CD tool, so you should be aware of in terms of cost, in terms of infrastructure maintenance. So you should be like at least know the basic difference between the CI/CD tools in order to propose the right CI/CD tool for your setup or for your project. And then post that, we're going to discuss the pricing and the limitations. Like GitHub Action, one thing we need to remember that GitHub Action will not replace any CI/CD tool, because each CI/CD tool will have their own limitations or advantages. So tomorrow they might like there is a chance of getting another tool, CI/CD tool, that companies will obviously adopting if that like solves the most of their problems, or if it gives developers seamless experience, they might easily switch to the CI/CD tool. But one thing you need to understand is the in terms of the process oriented, in terms of architecting the CI/CDs, the design, how you designing the workflows and helping developers to give them the like the best experience. So that way you should think of it. But and like other important thing is like the GitHub Actions is like evolving a lot in terms of their ecosystem, like how we have Apple and how we have the different products that revolve around Apple. So in the same way, GitHub will provide us everything on the UI itself, on the github.com itself. So you don't have to rely on third-party application services. We don't really require a complex infrastructure maintenance. So that's the advantage that solves when compared to other. So we're gonna discuss that limitations. And then so like the end of the session, we'll have like a QA sessions. If anyone have any questions in terms of the topics that we're gonna discuss, or if you have any other questions, we're gonna discuss. So are you guys good so far? Shall we get started?
Yeah, yeah,
Understanding.
yes, Surya.
Okay.
And one thing, can you explain during this process? In my previous project, I have worked in Nutanix. In that process, when we, when we commenting, right, while GitHub,
Mm.
right, we are commenting. While that process, we have to comment like something else, some bala something. Then it will getting to trigger that will taken by the GitHub Actions runner. Remaining things will taken care of the Jenkins. This is the process uh, we have followed. How can that structured? I mean, I did not understand that at that time, because uh, we can able to use the GitHubs, right? Because why they are using especially GitHub these things. I mean, GitHub Actions for that runner to trigger the job. And once you trigger the job, Jenkins will take care of that. I'm not
Yeah.
understanding. If they wanted
Okay.
to, yeah.
Yeah, even I didn't get your question first.
Yeah.
Let's do one thing. Let's
Yeah.
discuss this end of the session. And
Yeah.
meantime, can you post your question on the chat?
Yeah. Sure.
Meanwhile,
Sure.
like just frame it.
Yeah. Sure.
Definitely, we're gonna discuss. It's a good question that we're gonna discuss at the last.
Yeah. Sure. Sure.
Okay. Yeah, sure, brother. So, any questions, Pradeep, Prashant, Mahesh, anyone?
No, Surya.
Okay.
Actually, I had an experience of GitHub administration part. Even
Oh,
I
okay.
didn't understand the Bala's question, how the GitHub action triggers the Jenkins something.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Meanwhile, like we're gonna discuss that at the beginning. In terms of configuring, it's just a like a call that you make from the GitHub Actions to the Jenkins.
Yeah,
If there is a flow that
webhooks that can help, I think.
yeah, we're gonna discuss, because the Bala's question I didn't get clearly, but we can like anyway he's gonna post that in the chat, and then we can discuss that and the other question. Okay. So yeah, let's get started with the introduction. So let me share my notepad. So yeah, so the one second. Just select the right. Okay. So like I said, like the first thing that we're going to discuss is the introduction and a couple of use cases. So the first one is, what is GitHub Actions? So like this is a generic question that most of you already aware of it. It's like a tool that helps developers to set up their CI/CD pipelines, which can allow them to implement different stages. So the different stages could be anything, like they can implement build stage and test stage. They can also implement a deployment step as part of the pipeline. And GitHub Action will not only resolve this, it even solves more complex problems. For example, your organization have a requirement. Your organization have a requirement to rotate a secret. So this rotation will obviously a standard that every organization follows, because if you have an API token, let's say you have an API token. So this token the dev guys will use for some purpose to call the external services. So keeping the API token for a longer time is not a best practice. So they have their policy that sets 30 days rotation. Or you can also think this API token for some similar example like Azure pad token, for instance. Like for example, you have your Azure pad token. So this token we are using to download some packages from the Azure that gonna be defined inside the steps of your workflow. But for now, just understand the requirement is we need to rotate a secret for every 30 days and then update the secrets in the secret manager, or you can also update in the GitHub Actions. So manager comes and say he needs to design a workflow to rotate the secret every 30 days and update the secret in the secret manager of secret. So what we can do, so like generally, if you go and for every 30 days, if you go and you manually run the workflow, that is like not a best practice, because you need like there will be a manual intervention that will be happening. So what if you design a workflow and thus that workflow will be scheduled basis? For example, if I want to run the workflow on month end, so you can schedule that by defining the couple of steps inside the workflow. So what GitHub Actions will does is they will automatically run your workflow on every 30 days. So the functionality you can define anything. It varies based on the requirement, it varies based on the project. So the requirement could be anything. But what GitHub supports is to basically solves of scheduling the workflows without manual intervention that updates the secrets. And so when you design this workflow will be easily understood by the other folks as well, who is like, because you can have a structure defined in the workflow with proper steps. Like I said in the YAML syntax. So this YAML is like pretty straightforward. Anyone can easily understand at least about 30 to 40%. So that kind of complex problems, it even solves more than that. But just for the one example I want to show you is the secret rotation example that GitHub Actions supports. And so the other important thing that you need to understand is, like I was talking in the beginning of the class, so it is tightly integrated with the GitHub. So you don't need to set up a separate systems for CI/CD pipelines, and also it kind of a ecosystem. And so in terms of ecosystems, what we actually have is like actions. Like in Jenkins, we have a plugins, right? So in Jenkins, we'll have a 1800 plus plugins. I think I'm more than that. So similarly, in GitHub Actions, we have a plugins. We call it as Actions, which are more than 20,000 plus, and it is keep on growing because of the like the people from the community, or some other peoples from other parties who gonna like actually develop and then push the actions. You can also create your own action and then push it to the marketplace. We call it as a marketplace. So in this marketplace, you will get all the actions. So you'll have the verified actions as well. You will also have the unverified. So most of the times for the security practice, we need to make sure to whether you are using verified one, because not like most of the project, they don't agree to use unverified actions. So this kind of way of features that integrated. On top of it, there is one more thing. Let me clear this. So like you guys are talking about the trigger spot, right? So it even has different triggers options. So we have a separate concept on this with the real-time examples, but just to understand, so the thickest part is like super interesting because it supports like a push, pull request based trigger, and also issue based, and also schedule based to trigger the workflows. So we call it as these as events. So what is event is just if something happens on the GitHub UI, then my workflow should trigger. So GitHub currently supports these events, and each of the like event we have like a detailed session in the upcoming class, maybe I think tomorrow or day after tomorrow class. But triggers is something that is tightly integrated with GitHub Actions. You don't have to create a webhook and configure that webhook in the Jenkins. GitHub itself will have everything integrated as part of their solution. So that is one common use cases. So other thing that you need to understand is one of the use cases with, for example, if you take a pull request. So generally when you raise pull request, you have a main branch in your source code, and manager comes and asks us to create a CI/CD pipeline for this project. Let's say it's a Java project. And then you basically what, as a DevOps engineers, what we do, we create a future branch first. So we create a future branch / and the ticket ID. So ticket ID, let's say 3299. So we create a future branch from main, and then we develop all the features or CI/CD workflows in this. So once the changes are done, what we do, we raise a pull request to the main. So once you raise a pull request, you can set up your workflow to trigger in such a way that every time you raise a pull request to the main branch, the workflow should trigger. So it will start running the job. So what this job does, this will create a unit test. And the unit test will be added to the job summary in the GitHub Actions. So that way, what developers, they get like every time they raise a pull request, they will not raise, they'll raise once. But in pull request, you have a concept like opened, reopened, synchronous. So see what synchronous means, right? Once you raise a pull request, every time you make a push to this feature branch, the workflow will get triggered. So no need to worry, guys. We're going to discuss this later. But just to understand, like one use case that supports integrated with the GitHub is when you raise a pull request to the main, it will trigger a job. Every time you make a new feature, like every time you make a change to this feature branch, it gets triggered again. The job gets triggered again. The unit test will be added to the job summary. So it will create each job. It will create one job, 2 jobs for second push, third job for third push. So that way, what we are actually giving the benefit for the developers, if they're actually doing. So we set up this feature and we hand over to the dev guys. So what they do, every time they make a change to the feature break for any bug fix or new feature implementations, they can run their test cases on the fly. And that shows the test cases, like how many test cases failed, how many passed. They can directly see in the job summary without depending on any other teams. And it is like they can view everything on the GitHub UI itself. So that way they can develop the software and deliver the softwares, test the softwares seamlessly. So let's say if you have this setup in third party, like if you have this setup on the Jenkins, things would go like little complex. I'm not saying that will not solve your issue. It will solve your issue, but things will make little complex there. So we don't want to complex. So as the companies are evolving, us like there are so many things happening in the organization in terms of standards, we don't want to maintain any complex systems. Because if you already have like a separate tool that handles, take care of everything, that gives a developer's best experience. So definitely they will get rid of someday. They'll move everything from Jenkins or GitLab or CircleCI or Bamboo to the GitHub Actions. So personally, I have worked on projects, helped multiple clients to move the Jenkins workflows, Jenkins files, or GitLab files. And also I worked on Bamboo pipelines. So all of these I have migrated, like I have like there are more than like I have some projects we have like thousands of pipelines. I moved them to GitHub Actions. So Jenkins, like there are 100,000 pipelines that we have migrated. So how do we migrate? So we have like action importer tool. So that does this migration from Jenkins to GitHub Actions. So, and the migration will be like 70%. It will not be 100% fully functional, but it will be 70% that gets converted to GitHub Actions. And it's our responsibility as a DevOps engineer to make those workflows 100% functional and then deliver to the dev guys. Ultimately, these are the guys that we're going to deliver. So it's not like no one else will be part of this process in terms of delivering our workflows. So most of the time we work with the developers, and if they find any bugs, generally developers will do end-to-end testing of their source code. If they find in terms of pipelines, if they encounter any issues, so we are the one responsibilities for help them to fix as soon as possible. If something breaks in the production, pipeline breaks in the production, so it's our responsibility to view the logs and help them if there is an issue in the build step, if there is anything related to the source code, so that we need to find the error in the logs and then intimate to the dev guy immediately. That we generally call as proactiveness or whatever you call, but we, like I was talking in the previous session, it's not our responsibility, or we should not keep things in our ball, I mean, in our basket. So everything we should throw on the dev guys if there are any issues that is relevant to the dev specific or code specific. But if there is any issues with the configurations in terms of the pipeline configurations, or if there's any mismatch of the variables, that we should handle instantly, or we should start working on them, or we should intimate it, this the dev guys or the managers that, so this is the bug from the DevOps engineer's point of view. So this is gonna take at least like 1 or 2 hours to fix the bug. So as soon as the bug is fixed, we're gonna intimate to you to start proceeding the test cases. So that kind of communication, you should build a rapport with the dev guys. So the other use cases like the with respect to the GitHub Actions is right. So you can send notifications. Obviously, if you register to the GitHub UI, and if you any job you triggered, or if any job failed, or if someone else triggered on created a pull request, if you're part of the repository, so you will get notifications seamlessly. And other than that, one interesting feature that in the real time we generally use is automating code quality checks. Like I was talking about initial in the PR main, and then first we create a feature branch, and then we raise a PR. So every time you raise a PR along with the unit test, you can also integrate a step that does the, like for example, using SonarQube, you can check the code quality, the percentage, the quality gateways. Let's say the quality gateway is 80%. You can also set, and before deploying itself, you can run these 2 steps that will be added to the job summary, which gives developers a seamless integration. Like if something goes broke, something breaks down, they can fix it immediately instead of after deployment. So in the CI itself, everything we should be taking care. So in the CI itself, we should take care the unit test. In the CIC itself, we should care the SonarQube. In the CI itself, we should scan the Docker images if your application is a micro based. So CD will go like it's a deployment that we do to the target EKS or ECS. But in terms of the standards, so everything we should be taking care of the CI itself. And every time you make a pull request, or whenever you make a change or a commit to a feature branch, so these should be triggered automatically and added to the job summary. I'll show you anyway in the UI by the time when we do practice. So that way developers can see the job summary and see what are the unit test cases failed, like in terms of code quality checks, what are the standards that is failing, how can they improve, like they can think, like they'll think that how we can improve the code quality to check the, like to mark, like every company will have a standard, right? Like I was talking 80% quality check. So it should pass the 80%. So that way they'll fix around it. And they like, it should also, the CI should also show something like if any images that having vulnerabilities. So those vulnerabilities should be shown in the job summary itself for the developers to see, to see what happening, because nobody wants an image that gets deployed to the production with the vulnerability, because security folks. So in every organizations we have a security folks. So if they find something deployed in the prod with a vulnerability, So that will break whole AWS account. So the hackers can have their channel that they will open via that vulnerability, and then they will break the entire AWS account or entire instance. So we need to make sure that you have zero vulnerabilities for the Docker images that you need to maintain before you release the product to the productions. So like, yeah, the second thing is key concept. So like I was telling, right? So most of the, when you are working in a GitHub project, GitHub Actions project, so most of the terms you hear terms like workflows, you hear terms like jobs, steps, you hear terms like runners, and you hear terms like actions, all of these. So let's understand one by one, because we have a dedicated session down the line, all of this topic in depth. But for now, just understand. So workflow is like a simple, what you can say, it is like a template that you feed to that GitHub Actions. You are telling to GitHub Actions, so these are the steps I have in my template. You just perform on your end. So in workflows, you can have one or more jobs. One or more jobs. So you can define one or more jobs. So you can also define if the jobs you can run parallelly, or you can also define inside a workflow such a way that the job should run one by one, or you should also set it as you can run the workflows. I mean, or you can run the jobs parallelly. It depends on how the requirements, based on the requirement that that you have in a project, you can also set in such a way. And you also have a step section. So steps you can think of individual tasks. So individual tasks, let's say you have a task that should log in into AWS account, or you have a task that should list the S3 buckets. So you define those kind of functionality in smaller chunks. So for first one, you define S3 list. You have this one task. You have another step. Let's say you want to upload some object, S3 upload. So you define that in a separate steps. So you can have multiple steps inside a job that you can define it. So the fourth one is runners. So you might have heard about Jenkins master and worker nodes, right? For running your jobs on the worker nodes. So in a similar way, GitHub Actions runs on runners. The runners are like kind of a server you can think of where you can execute our workflows. So in runners, we have different flavors. Like for the Linux, you have Ubuntu. You also have like Windows-based runners. You also have a Mac OS. So most of the times you work on Linux-based Windows, but in some projects where their systems are running on Windows, so you might need to run your workflow steps. For example, your workflow is having a requirement to run PowerShell scripts. So running the PowerShell script in Linux is like, you can run in Linux PowerShell script, but you need to write a couple of steps in terms of executing the PowerShell script on the Linux. But if you like if you have a Windows instance, a runner that is already available at the org level, so generally runners will be configured at the org level. If you have those runner that your project already set up, so you can run the PowerShell scripts inside this Windows runner that is integrated with your org. And Mac OS, I never worked on a project that works on that runs jobs on the Mac OS, but this Mac OS, like, it's mostly used on the development purposes. I don't see any projects running the jobs on the Mac OS, at least in the real time. And then we have finally the actions. So like I was talking about the marketplace actions. So let me show that quickly. So if you see in my page, so this is the marketplace we have. So we generally all the functionality, like just like how we have Jenkins plugin. So in marketplace and place we have like actions, custom actions. that will be, for example, you have a checkout action. So basically, checkout is basically you check out the entire source code on the runner. So we have this action. If you scroll down, you can see the steps that the action is using. It uses action/checkout. So this is the like syntax that you need to follow, and the version 5. So version is basically they will release like version 1, version 2, version 3 with fixing with, or they're gonna release with the new features. And then syntax which is like with repository. And then you also have different features based on the use cases that you can define. But generally, checkout is like the basic step, initial step that you define inside a workflow to check out your source code on the runner. So this kind of marketplace action is already available, which is verified, and then you can make use of it. Similarly, you can also have a super linter. It's like a for code analysis. You can use it, or if you want to fix your source code, super linter is like a super tool that checks your code, entire source code files, and it will also report any issues that any of your um, uh, in terms of standards, if it is not maintaining or any issues. So you can, if you scroll on, you can make use of this action. If you see, and this is the workflow, and it is a sample how you're gonna use this. So you just simply call the custom action with the version, and then you can make use of this workflow to execute. And then not just that, if we have actions that is supported by the AWS, let's just search with AWS. See, you have an action which majorly we use this custom action, configure AWS. So generally what, if you want to your workflow, GitHub action workflow. 1 second, let me show in the UI whiteboard. See, let's say you have a GitHub Actions workflow. So when you are working in a real project, you obviously you talk to the AWS, your workflow will talk to the Azure, and your workflow will talk to the GCP. Let's say you have a step that should log in into AWS. So writing, we have like AWS commands, right? We have AWS commands where you first set up the access key, and then you set up the secret key on your terminal. So once you set up access key and secret key, then you run AWS login command to log in into the AWS account. So all these steps are like what to say? These are like we should avoid writing multiple steps if you already have an action that is already available. So in action, if you use, you will be writing in 1 or 2 lines everything. So if you go like I showed in the GitHub action UI, so you simply use users and the action path. That's it. And then you pass the access key and secret key. You just write 4 lines instead of exporting the access key and secret key on your CLI and then doing AWS login and then performing the steps is like hard to maintain. You should reduce the workflow lines as much as you can. So that way, so GitHub Actions will have the actions available, which is already developed by the developers or whoever developed and pushed to the registry with a verified badge. So if you have a verified badge that does these steps, the functionality is already available, right? You just make use of this functionality in your workflow to reduce or what to say, to reduce the number of lines, or in terms of maintaining the standards, because it is a verified action, right? And you can trust this action. And yeah, let me show that action in the, if you scroll down bottom. So if you want a requirement to log in into the AWS, what you do is simply use these steps. What you basically use, so you call the actions using users, and then you pass the reason and the role here. And if your authentication is based on a role, generally we use role-based authentication. So that way you just pass the role name. That's it. You are not required to use access key and secret key if you are using OIDC role. So this is the OIDC authentication that most of the projects we use, and we don't generally use what we say. We don't in the real time. We don't use access keys and secret keys. Those are like not a security best standards. So in my project, we use OADC. So OADC role, we create it in the AWS. And these roles we create it like for AWS, like we have like accounts like dev, we have accounts like test, we have AWS account with stage, and we have AWS account with prod. So we create OADC role in dev, test, stage, and prod. So we create, for let's say you create a role called GitHub Actions role. This is for the dev. And then you create a role for GitHub Actions. Let's say it is for test, and same for stage and prod. So every time during the deployment, let's say your workflow, CI/CD workflow should deploy to dev. So first what this workflow does, if you are deploying to the dev, it will first log into the dev AWS account using this role. It will not use access key and secret key. It will not use that. Using this role, you can authenticate to the AWS. And similar for the test, if the CI/CD is deploying to test, we authenticate to the AWS using the OADC test role. And the stage is stage role, and the prod is prod role. So these are one of the real-time project scenario that generally we use. So during that time, if you want to authenticate, so once you created the role in your project, once you have the role created, so you pass the role to this custom action which is already available. So that way you are able to log in into the AWS account. And you also have a different login for the, let's say you have a login for the ECR. So generally what, whenever you are trying to build and push the images, first thing what you need to do, you need to log in into the ECR. For the login into ECR, you are not, as I said, you are not supposed to run the AWS CLI commands. You can do that in multiple ways. You can write, define the series of steps using AWS CLI commands, and you can able to push the images. But you should reduce the number of steps as I mentioned. So that way you can make use of this uses action. So uses and the AWS login custom action. So if you just define this, so once you log in into the AWS, you are already logged into AWS, let's assume, and then you can able to log in ECR instance after that. So that way you can able to log in the ECR with minimal steps. That way you can able to push the images. So this functionality is already available. So you just need to call this function, because by default action workflows will have access this marketplace, will have a default access to the marketplace. So to make use of those steps. And then you also have a ECS custom actions. The list will go on. So based on the requirement, the first thing you need to go is you need to come here marketplace and find out the use case that you are looking. Multiple people will have multiple use cases in the real time. So the first step that you guys should come here in the marketplace and find the action that is suitable for your use case. That is super important. Okay, so let's create a simple workflow. Just a second. Let's do one thing. One second, I'm sharing my screen. So the work, I mean, the example as well also, I'm not like prepared already. So I'm asking Copilot to generate that. So that way you gonna, like you guys can also do the same in terms of developing our workflows. The first time I'm like right now I'm in Copilot session. So what I'm gonna telling to the Copilot is I'm opening the inline chart, and now I'm asking Copilot write a simple workflow to and display. Hello. I don't want to make things complicated. This is the first time we are writing a workflow. So just see like in terms of the UI and the different features. So I have the workflow, and one more important thing is right now my workflow.yml is in the folder 929. But in order your workflow should run without any issues, you need to place your workflow in .github workflows. So this is the workflow you have to define. Let's move this workflow inside this folder. So I have moved this workflow. So right now my workflow is in GitHub Actions /workflows. So this is the standard that is recommended by GitHub for working with the workflows, because it has its own separation of files with respect to your project files. So that way, that's why they have created this folder structure for workflows. So let's run this job. Let's name it from the GitHub.com. Let's create a simple repository. Let's say the repository name is hello world. And then I'm making things like visibility public, and then I'm just simply adding a readme file, small readme file, and then creating a repository. This is like most of you guys know, but just for those of you who are not created a repository earlier, so I'm just showing them for them. For others, if you guys already know, just ignore this. And so the first thing I'm going to add to this repository is the .github folder. .github /workflows/ and the workflow file name. This is the workflow, and then adding the content. So just what this basically doing is, so the name of the workflow name is hello world workflow, and then the trigger type is on push. Any push that happens to the main, the workflow will get triggered. And then we also have a job section where the job name is hello world, and that runs on Ubuntu latest, where it has a step section, basically prints the hello world. So you can have the steps with the name, and then you can define the run command, basically what this step does, what it should actually does. And one more thing you need to understand is this is a Linux based runner. You can also define or mention the runner as you wish based on the scenario. You can also define the Windows based runner here. But for now, I want to execute my steps on this Linux runner, Linux based runner. And this Ubuntu-latest is provided by the GitHub. They will only manage the servers, scaling, everything will happen on their background. We are not gonna take care of the infra part. We're just making use of the runner that is available on the GitHub itself. So, but in real time, we are not gonna use the GitHub provided runners, because we gonna create our own runners for security reasons or pre-installed softwares if you want to install. So that time we use like industry or companies provided runners. But for this demo, just understand that these jobs steps will executed on this runner. So let's commit this. And then always make sure you give a proper commit message, because the reason being is when you're working on the user stories, tasks, and generally leads or managers will review the work based on the commits. Obviously, right? How can they track your work? They're not coming to you and they're not gonna sit with you. So every work that they assign you, obviously you work on these source code files or your DevOps files. So the only way they can track is your commits that you make to your feature branches. So that's the only place they can keep an eye. So that's why every commit message you push, you should give proper commit message, not just added file, created file, but you should add what functionality you added. So right now it's a new workflow. Now that is fine, but when you are actually implementing something, you should give proper message to the leads or the managers so that they can able to see that you are really working on something. I'm just committing the changes. So let's go to the actions. This is the action tab. Let's wait until it started. So now the workflow is started running. You just click on it. This is the job summary, what I was talking. So you can you can see here, this is a summary. So right now it's a simple job. So that's why you don't have much information about the summary. So, but in the unit test cases, reports or Sonar Cube reports, not reports, at least the table, what is actually happened. So those will be seen in the summary itself. And what other features you have? You also have a job name. We have only one job, which is hello world. And then basically you can also see the triggered, like who pushed you the changes. So image factory web is the username. This is my GitHub handle name. So he's the guy that pushed or triggered this job. And this job runs triggered on the main, and the status of the job is success. Right now, job is success, and the duration of the job, like how many seconds or minutes the job ran. And right now, the job doesn't create any artifacts. That's why it's nil. So you can also see the workflow file here, like from which workflow file this job is executed. If you simply click on it here, the workflow file, you see the workflow that is used by this job. And if you go inside the job, you can see the series of steps. So the first step is basically where it initiated the runner provided by the GitHub. So every time a runner is created, you need to understand that a GitHub token is created. This will be discussed further, but just to understand, every time you run a workflow, GitHub will create a GitHub token just to fetch the source code. So that's why it created a token with read permission. And then next step is the hello world. So as you see, it executed the hello world, the echo step on the runner. And then this select post step, which is a cleanup step that GitHub will automatically add it. We don't need to care about it. But if you, these are like, this gives like proper logging. If you want to see a full log, you have to go to the settings and see, click on view raw logs. If you just click on view raw logs, you can able to see, like, the developers sometimes they ask, they will not find some lines. So, and they, some other person will, for debugging purpose, if they ask you to share the full logs, so that time you go to the settings and click on view raw logs, or you can create a archive with the full logs. You can download it or you can share it to them. And this is a simple jobs. Basically, you go here and you can, based on the, every time you push, the workflow will like start filling up with the new workflows, everything. And yeah, that is like in terms of demo that I have it. Let's move on to the next step in terms of so the next thing is in terms of pricing and limitations. So for pricing with the GitHub is, whenever you run the GitHub Actions workflow, for the public repositories, you get free or unlimited minutes. What does it mean, right? Like I showed in the previous demo, we have executed a job that runs on 7 seconds, right? So similarly, you can run your workflows with multiple jobs, but if it is a public repository, you can run unlimited. So right now it is 7 seconds. You can run jobs with 20 minutes, 50 minutes. For instance, I'm saying you can make use of the jobs with unlimited minutes for a public repository. Because obviously we don't, in projects, we do we really use public repositories? Do you expose your source code to the publicly? No, right? And that's why they have kept it like so that nobody will like put their source code publicly and expose the secret information. So that's why they go with the private repositories, right? So here they have set it some limitations where for the private repository it is free for 2000 minutes per month. And if the plan that you based on the premium plan, or if you paid the increase the plan, they will increase the minutes. But generally we are not gonna pay anything, like we're not gonna pay anything in the real time projects. And the other thing is like limitations that I want to show you is, so generally we run jobs that runs for some time, but we run jobs in some projects that runs around 6 hours. So GitHub Actions will run the jobs up to 6 hours. After that, job will automatically cancel. GitHub will automatically cancel. Like you might think, do we really run jobs that last for hours? Yes, some projects they have jobs for doing some ETLA processing or from data extracting or data uploading. If they have a complex setup, so obviously they run jobs with more than 6 hours. So that way, so like they have to plan accordingly, because the GitHub limitation is they can run jobs of only up to 6 hours. and then you can run up to 20 concurrent jobs. What does it mean? And depending upon the accounts that you have in terms of like whether it's a free plan, paid accounts, so up to 20 concurrent jobs we can run. Like you can run jobs that run parallelly up to 20 concurrent jobs you can run. And there is one more thing called API requests. So it is like limited for 1,000 per day in free tier. So API requests in terms of whenever you work with the GitHub UI, you obviously make API calls to GitHub. It could be anything for invoking some workflows or let's say for downloading any artifacts from the GitHub, for any downloading for any packages from the GitHub. So you obviously make an external API call to the GitHub. So that API requests are limited 1,000 per day. And it will gonna increase based on the premium that you're gonna pay. But for the free tier, only 1,000 API requests only you can make to the GitHub account. Yeah, and the other thing I have is the comparison. Let's clean this up. So obviously, we have also have multiple CI/CD tools in the market, and those are also like in terms of functionality, those are also solves the problems just like GitHub Actions. The first thing I want to cover, which is already covered, is in terms of the integration. So in GitHub Actions, we have like a tightly integration in terms of pull requests, in terms of issues, and also in terms of scheduling. So all these are like inbuilt features as part of the GitHub Actions. In terms of in GitHub Actions also, in terms of maintaining the secrets or tokens, you can create the secrets and tokens in the repo level. Let's say you have a repo, you can create secrets or tokens at the repository settings, or you can create a secrets or API tokens or at the org level. Anywhere you can use. If you create secrets or API, variables at the repo level, so those will be restricted at only the repo level. But if you create the secrets and variables at the org level, so who are all part of this org, what are all the repositories that you created, the part of the organizations, these repositories can make use of these secrets or variables. You can think of it scenarios like you have a SonarQube token where the workflow wants to talk to SonarQube. So you create a SonarQube token and upload in the org level secrets. So any repository that make use of the SonarQube, or if any repository wants to access to the SonarQube, so they can, since it is defined on this a token on the org level, you can simply call that secret with the secret name. As simple as that. So that way you are not maintaining the token on individual repositories. Rather, you are just creating the token on the org level, only one place. So these are the like so many advantages or best practices that GitHub ecosystem will provide that you can make use of it. So the other thing GitHub stands out compared to other tools like Jenkins. So Jenkins, like I showed you, like 18 plus plugins, but in the marketplace of the GitHub Actions, we have like 20,000, like I was showing. So we have the custom actions for checkout. We have custom actions to set up anything in Node.js, or if you want to deploy to AWS. It's just a like simple lines that you write, the simple steps that you define to make use of this functionality. And let's discuss one more thing in terms of community. So GitHub obviously will have a larger ecosystems in terms of helping the queries. GitHub community will have so many users, active users so many people they contribute to the open source in terms of the actions, and it also have developers familiarity. What does it means, right? So in GitHub, you can think of a repository as a product where multiple people, you can also call it as an open source. So where multiple people will contribute to this product. So like you might have heard an open source project. You can some source project will provided by multiple organizations. Let's say Red Hat will have their own products that they will put in on the open source so that other people can come and actually contribute to this project. So this kind of developers community will give us extra efforts more than your job. You can contribute the open source project. And like Jenkins, I talked about the plugins and the limitations, because most of the functionalities that is available in the actions, custom actions, is not available in the Jenkins because of the wider range of custom actions that they develop. So similarly, you have GitLab CI. So where it also has its own limitations in terms of it is not having any custom actions kind of functionality. And GitLab is like more of GitLab focused, just like how GitHub is focused. GitLab will have its own functionalities that is bounded with the GitLab itself inside itself. And we also have a CircleCI. There are very few projects that runs on CircleCI. In terms of CircleCI as well, it has its own limitations in terms of 3 minutes. And when you compare your CircleCI with GitHub Actions, right? So GitHub Actions will have inbuilt events, like I talked about the triggers, right? It has a push event, have a pull request event. So similarly, CircleCI, we also have a GitHub hooks, webhooks, where it requires some extra steps that you need to define to make this functionality work, which is like a tedious step to do some kind of extra works, right? And yeah, and other than that, in terms of security and complaints, like I was talking about the security secrets. So your GitHub Actions will have inbuilt secrets. And one important feature that GitHub Actions will stand out with other CI tools is branch protection or environment protection. You can think of environment protection rules. So in real time, as a DevOps engineers, we work with dev teams, and then they'll trigger a workflow so that deploys to multiple environments, right? And we don't want to deploy, if it is a lower environment like dev, that's fine. They can directly deploy to the dev. More than dev, if they are deploying to the test or stage, there should be a manual approval that should be required as part of the deployment, because nobody wants to deploy the change straight away, because some kind of code reviews or some kind of approvals that we need to get from the release managers or some other team who has responsibility whoever responsible for the project, they should give some kind of approval to proceed for the other environments. So for example, if you don't have any protection rules, so protection rules, what it does, so protection rules, we create environments, the dev, you create a dev environment, you create a test, and you create a stage, you create a prod. So you create all of these environments in the GitHub UI, and you add a protection rule, say this is the team. You know how to create a team, like I showed in the previous demo. You create a team and you assign that team as a rule to this environment protection rule. So that way, whoever part of this team, whenever you trigger a workflow to deploy to the test, first thing it will wait for the approval. Wait for the approval. So once the approval is approved, then only it will deploy to the test, similar to the stage and production. So why do we need approvals? It's kind of a check that you put that nobody should allow to deploy the changes directly on the test state and prod without approvals. So the environment protection rule is like the problem that solves this, which gives you a best practice or a standard in terms of the DevOps process. If I want to show you that in the GitHub UI, you have to go to repository settings and go to environments and then create an environment and give dev. Let's instance if it is a dev environment, and then you click on required reviewers. So here is the reviewer. You can add the reviewers like up to 6 reviewers, or you can add teams. You can create a team and you can send to it. And there is option called prevent self review. So you can check this mark. The reason being is nobody wants to approve on their own, right? We should restrict that. If you are not restricting this, they can only they can able to approve on their own and they can deploy. We don't want any self review. We don't want any self approval. So that's why we are checking this tick mark so that so nobody able to see the check mark to approve on their own. So once you add, like let's say you can add people here and then you can add save protection rule. So that way the environment dev will be created. And similarly, like you see, you can create environments like this and then add the reviewers. Right now I'm not having any users or teams. But this is how you can create. You can also create environment for the stage and then configure it. And if you go to stage environment is created. So dev, anyway, you don't need to provide any approvals. The dev guys can able to deploy directly, but from staging, starting from stage or test, we call it as a higher environments where the approval is required. For a test environment, we should get approval from the testing team. For stage environments, we should get approval from the release managers or project manager or leads, dev leads, whoever responsible parties, or from the DevOps lead, we should get approvals to deploy the changes. This is like out of box feature that I don't think the CI tools will have these features. It can resolve those issues, but in terms of like I was talking about ecosystems, where it has inbuilt features, whereas everything is integrated on the UI itself. You just have like a couple of buttons that you need to press. That's it. You don't need to integrate something externally, third-party services, or maintain anything such that. Yeah, I think I covered for today's sessions. And from starting from tomorrow, like it will be theoretical plus practical, just like how I talked about the real-time scenarios, use cases, and couple of, I mean, the same way the sessions will go when we are discussing the actual topics, and we go deep in those topics with the real-time examples. And I'll try to also cover as much as practical demos so that it is easy for you guys to understand the concept even better. Yeah, I think it's time for you start asking the questions.
Yeah. Yeah, Surya, good evening. Yeah. As I said previously, my question was when we pull review it, right? When you code review, right? We have to pull request. We have to create a pull request, right? When you when you create a pull request, there is we have commented some kind of we commented like Jenkins make it so. That is the word we have to add it to that pull request. Then only it will that job get triggered. That's the process. For that process, we in my Nutanix account, they didn't use the webhooks because of their own restrictions. They didn't use the webhooks. They used webhook actions for that, for runners. Something they used webhook actions for that. I'm not sure why they did that. I'm not sure, but because I didn't aware of webhook actions at that time. So if you have an idea for that, can you explain me?
So if my understanding, like the question that you asked, my understanding is correct that so you have like a pull request that you guys create, and that triggers. So does that trigger the GitHub Actions or Jenkins job?
Jenkins job, actually Jenkins job, but the process how you trigger the Jenkins job would be taking care of the GitHub Actions. GitHub Actions has to trigger the Jenkins. That's how they created.
Okay, but so you basically you have two jobs. Do you have two jobs or one job? You have GitHub Action job and you also have Jenkins job. Is my
Yeah,
understanding correct?
GitHub job is GitHub Actions job is constant. Whenever we commented, that has to trigger to that particular job, whatever the job we mentioned in before. That's what.
Okay. So here is the flow, right? So you raise a pull request. That pull request will trigger the GitHub Action job, and then
Yes.
GitHub Action job will basically triggers the Jenkins job.
Yes,
and you don't
exactly.
know why they are doing like that, but
Yeah,
how the
we have
flow.
a bit. Yeah, that's I don't know why they are using GitHub Actions here. They're using runners. I read
And
YAML flow
hmm,
as well, but I did
okay.
not get the why they
Any other
deliberately did that.
steps integrated in the GitHub action workflow, or is
Nothing,
just the
nothing.
API call
Just
that you make the Jenkins job trigger? Does it make any
yes.
other?
That's the purpose of the GitHub Actions there. That is the private account. I mean, Nutanix is a private cloud. They did not use the outside of the things because they have to use highly secured. So they are used for this thing. Yeah, I'm not sure why they are using.
Okay, why they're using, even I cannot say, but in terms of implementation, right? Like you have a setup that like I was talking about, right? Obviously you should create a Jenkins API token on the Jenkins side. That token you should be configured as a API token in your GitHub Actions side to make a API request. So you basically, I'm sure you guys must be, as part of the GitHub Action workflow, you guys might have defined a step to make a curl request to the Jenkins job, if my understanding is correct. And then based on the curl request, it will trigger the jobs using GitHub webhooks based on the push or pull request. They might also create a events by the push or pull events. I'm not sure. I mean,
Yeah,
workflow, how you guys define. Hmm.
whenever we commented that code could be pushed to that main repository.
Yeah.
Yeah, whenever they push the GitHub Actions has to trigger the Jenkins job.
What the Jenkins job does? What was the functionality of the Jenkins job?
Jenkins job will regular flow. We have a Jenkins file that is in that is in dev environment. We have a mm, you know steps, basic steps. Download the code and everything. We have a cache, image caching will be there. That image caching we have done it. And Python, that using the Python we have created some kind of dependencies we have, right? Those dependencies we have pulled it from the repositories, and some of them pulled from the images, whatever the used images, right? Those we have pulled from there, and we created new image from out of that. We created a environment now. That is the environment, whatever the environment, but for suitable for testing and developing, we created that only. Then we can make the image out of that. Then that image they have their own I mean private cloud. So they have to pull they have a certain kind of infrastructure, some kind of different from the AWS and Azure. They have to pull the one of the instance, and they have pulled all the code into that, and they will build the everything. Yeah, they have their own setup. That's how they have EKS on top of that. In that particular node, they have a EKS setup. On that particular EKS setup, we can able to uh, set up that. I mean, in dev environment we can able to test that particular service. Uh, we run that particular in a container, run it on that particular node. That particular service we tested it whether it is working fine or not. That is what we have done in dev. This is what dev, not in production and dev. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So the reason even I cannot tell, because there are some projects that runs on legacy systems where
Yeah.
they have their own in terms of, how can I say, security bad practices, or I don't know how hybrid architecture in terms of Jenkins that you guys maintain. But there are projects still maintain hybrid approach in terms of where they'll have multiple two CI/CD tools, and then they play around with configuring. I'm sure down the line they will also have a plans to move that to everything to GitHub Actions. Definitely
That
they'll do that.
that code written by multiple people. That's not by single people. I mean, they are
Mm.
very clumsy. They were very complicated code. They directly put the secrets into the code. I'm not sure why they did that. When I deployed to that project, I was surprised how they put it everything in a single thing. And whenever
Yeah.
we have a Jenkins repo, right? For shared library, they put everything secrets, everything, passwords, usernames, they put directly. They did not use any secrets, secret worlds, everything. They did not even hide it from the Unix. We have port it, right,
Uh-huh.
export, right. They did not use
Uh-huh.
that as well. They directly put
Uh-huh.
it. They put it in the that was very concern. We have reconfigured everything. We have to restructuring everything. That was hectic work for us in Nutanix account.
Yeah, that requires extra efforts to get rid of whatever the values that defined in the libraries, and the steps that you need to either get it the secret from the credentials or secret manager or Azure Key Vault. That's how that is how it is, right? We cannot do anything, but
they don't have any secret manager as part of their they use their own infrastructure. They don't have
oh,
any thing. We have to they have to grab from the something Ashik of world, right? They did not use that as well.
okay.
Yeah, that's what the reason they put it directly. I'm not sure. We have reconfigured everything. We have tried to put it in something in private repository, all the secrets, and they have to pull it from the export. We have export it, and we have to pull it from the private account every time. We have to authenticate every time. That's what we have done in my previous, I mean, Nutanix account. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, apart from that, and
And
keep it aside this question. And I have another question. You said only 1,000 in the premium for premium GitHub Actions. We have only 1,000 requests per, I mean, per account per a day, right?
API requests.
API request, 1,000 API requests for GitHub Actions, right? You said.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah,
API calls, not GitHub Actions,
API.
GitHub API calls. Yeah.
Yeah, is that a limitations for that? I mean.
Yeah, for free tier, it is a limitation.
How can we increase that if it is a large scale things, we get to we will get a lot of API requests, right? How can
Yeah,
we?
GitHub. Yeah, so that's why it is differentiating between the free plan and the paid plan. So if you opt the paid plan, so the number of requests will increase based on the plan that you choose. But so it's not like one more thing you need to understand. So this limitation, because of these limitations, GitHub also have another option called I don't know whether you have heard of it. We also have something called GitHub app.
Yeah.
GitHub app. So instead of using personal access token, you can create a GitHub app so that does the authentication request, where you can have something like 5,000 requests as per the documentation that if you use GitHub apps, you can get 5,000 requests.
Can we
API
integrate
requested.
this app? Can we integrate with the GitHub Actions, right? I mean,
Yeah. You can do that.
yeah. Today's session could be I mean a bit faster. I need to I need to rewatch it again, and I will if I have any doubts, I will reach out to you definitely.
Sure, because I
Yeah.
have integrated some use cases. Maybe because I don't want to show like the plain context,
Yeah,
general
exactly.
bookish kind of it. I try to relate at least some kind of use cases.
And try to at the end of the session summarize whatever we have, right? We have discussed so far. If you summarize from first to last whatever the steps, that would be helpful for us, because
Sure.
we can able to write down anywhere, and we can able to we can able to structure what we
Anyway,
start to end.
I'll share the documentation for the
Yeah.
topic discussion like I shared
Yeah.
the previous session, but yeah, that I'll do.
Yeah, thank you, Surya. Bye.
Thank you.
Surya, hi, sir. I had one question.
Yeah, Pradeep.
So GitHub Actions is something like we can, is in Jenkins plugins is equal to the GitHub Actions, something, it's plugins equal thing, right?
Yeah. So
Do we need
GitHub,
to do we need to install anything extra like we usually do in Jenkins?
no.
Just like we need to use the command that you showed, right? Check out.
No, you don't have to install anything. Just
Okay.
a template you just have to write. That's where it has its advantage of maintaining the infrastructure. In Jenkins, you have to maintain your own infrastructure. You have to do a lot of stuff in terms of configurations. That will get rid of. GitHub Action will have its own everything set it up. We just have to write the workflows and tell GitHub Actions. That's it.
Okay.
But Surya, as you said, we have to create our, for a security purpose, we have to create our servers, and we have to attach to that, right? Runners, as per runners.
Yeah, that is not comes with that comes with the self-hosted runners. So nobody
Sorry?
wants to self-hosted runners.
Okay.
Self-hosted runners, because organizations will create their own runners for
Okay.
running your jobs for security reasons. They don't want traffic to go outside of the network. If you
Okay.
use self-hosted, if you are using GitHub provided runners, those runners will be running on the outside of your actual network, your company network. We don't want
Yeah.
to leak your data running your jobs on those runners. So that's why we have a concept called self-hosted runners. We have a separate class on that. So where you run jobs on the self-hosted runners, which is bounded internally, so that you don't leak your data.
I
So
mean, we have to give the tags, and those tags we have to use it in
exactly.
right?
Just like in Jenkins, you define the labels, right?
Yeah,
Similarly, you define the tag of the runner. That's it. Your job will be executed on that runner.
Is for that if AWS, right? So AWS have a separate actions plugin. I mean, as you see, as you shown us, right? How to log in S3 ECS. Similar way, we have actions for that. So actions we have included in that file. So it can able to find that particular tag, right?
For runners, we just define it at the job level. Let me share that.
Okay.
It's in the place of, can you see my screen? Yeah. Can you see my screen? Actions.
Yeah.
If you go your workflow inside this job, you go your work profile. So instead of defining the runner runs on Ubuntu latest, you define a tag with the runner name. That's it. And where you can see those runners, you can go to settings, actions, runners. You see a tab called runners. You click on it. Right now, I don't have any self-hosted runners. Right now, like the previous example I showed, I ran the job on the GitHub-hosted runner. But if we also have a concept called self-hosted runners, where you can create a self-hosted runner, click on new self-hosted runner. So you can choose the where you want to run. If it is a Linux server, you want to execute job, you click on Linux and you perform all the steps on the server, wherever you want to configure your runner. So like you can configure the Linux runner on the EC2, or you can also configure the runner on the EKS cluster. So EKS is the best practice where the pods will be, concept will come into picture, right? Where you can run your jobs on the pods. So that what advantage it gets is, right, as soon as the job is completed, the pod will be terminated. And we don't need to pay extra price for the, because for the general traditional EC2, if you configure a runner, you will pay the cost 24/7, right? Because the instance should run all the time. And no developers are not, we are not sure when they will trigger the job, right? And we cannot rely on the EC2 instance, setting up your runner on the EC2 instance. So we should configure that in the EKS or any container based, so that the containers, like, they will sit for ideal, and we no need to pay extra cost. Whenever the trigger happens, GitHub Actions will automatically run up the pods and execute your jobs. And we have like separate session. I'll tell in detail, but don't get confused.
I understand.
Yeah.
Now I understand. This is Linux command. We have to run it, and whatever the setup we have done it, right? We have to run it there. It will automatically connect to GitHub Actions to that particular thing. Yeah.
Correct. So any other questions? I think I'll share the recording. I'll share the documentation. If you feel any other questions you have, you can feel free to ping me. I can help you. I think if you guys don't have anything, we can wrap it up. And see you tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. We can connect and start discussing other topics. I'm super excited to wrap it up the concepts as soon as possible and move on to the projects.
One small request, Surya.
Yeah.
I think you are in too rush. If you can slow down, bit easy to follow.
Definitely.
Yeah. Thank you, Surya. Thank you.
No problem. Thanks, Pala. Thanks, Pradeep. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye.